Holmes, Leslie Marshall, thank you for being here. I'm Harris. We'll continue on the breaking news. Here's Dana.
This is a Fox News alert as we wait for President Trump to emerge from his meeting on tax reform with Senate Republicans. Fox News has confirmed North Korea has fired another ballistic missile, the first launch since being renamed a state sponsor of terror. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. President Trump making a rare Capitol Hill appearance to rally Republicans on tax reform as Democrats say they're skipping a White House meeting because they don't believe President Trump is ready to negotiate on keeping the government open. We have live Fox team coverage on a very busy news day. Mike Emanuel and Brett Baer are standing by. But let's begin with Jennifer Griffin. Jennifer, you have information about what's just happened in North Korea.
Well, Dana, we've spoken to senior U.S. defense officials who confirmed that, in fact, North Korea did launch a ballistic missile to the east at approximately 1:30 a.m. Local time. That was about 30 minutes ago. It is not clear at this point how far that missile flew and whether it was an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile. They are still analyzing the trajectory, the path of the ballistic missile, but it did fly to the east. It was launched from south of the capital, Pyongyang, in the southern province of Pyeongseong. We are told that, again, this comes on the day that the South Korean's reunification minister had warned that North Korea was closer to completing its nuclear program and could, in fact, have that program completed within a year. President Trump, obviously, is right now on Capitol Hill. He is not near the Situation Room. The Pentagon and the South Korean military are analyzing the trajectory of that ballistic missile. It's the first ballistic missile to have been fired since September 15th. October, interestingly enough, Dana, was the first month since January that North Korea had not fired any ballistic missiles. Dana?
Is there anything to it being set off around 3 o'clock in the morning, their time?
Well, it is unusual that it would be fired in the middle of the night. Normally, we've seen these take off, be launched at about 6 a.m. local time during daylight where they can visually see the trajectory. But every time the North Koreans test these ballistic missiles, they are testing, they're trying to hone in on different aspects of this rocket technology. One of the things they've been having trouble with is the re-entry technology. These missiles fly hundreds of miles into the air, so it is clear that they are trying to hone their ballistic missile program to marry it up with their nuclear program. Remember, it's believed that they already have about 20 nuclear weapons, Dana.
And Jennifer, Defense Secretary James Mattis is going to join the president for his meeting at the White House a short time from now. This is the meeting that the Democrats have said they are not going to, but maybe they should change their mind and decide to go and learn a little bit more about this issue.
Well, it's interesting, Dana. It's not clear whether now that meeting will focus more, of course, on the North Korea missile launch. But originally, the president had hoped that Secretary Mattis could explain to congressional leaders why the Pentagon needs $700 billion next year to help address some of the major readiness problems after 16 years of war. The Pentagon needs billions of dollars to repair warplanes and reset equipment. We've been reporting in recent days about the spike in training accidents and non-combat deaths, planes falling out of the sky, poor training that led to 2 recent naval accidents in the Pacific. The strain on the force is evident in terms of the rise in non-combat air accidents, up 130% this year alone. President Trump had wanted to use the defense secretary's stature among Democrats and Republicans alike to ensure that they protect the defense budget as they haggle about tax reform, DACA, and other budget issues, Dana.
Certainly a lot of things on the agenda. Jennifer, thanks for getting us up to speed. Now to Capitol Hill, where the president is meeting with Senate Republicans. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel joins me. Mike, what's the state of play on taxes?
Well, Dana, a presidential visit to the Senate Republican luncheon is obviously designed to provide a sense of urgency, also to try to rally these GOP senators to get to yes. They need 50 to say yes. Earlier, the Senate Majority Leader urged his colleagues to seize this moment.
We're excited about this opportunity. It's been 30 years since the tax code was dealt with in such a comprehensive way to try to reform that code and make America more competitive. We're working hard to get it across the finish line this week.
Earlier, some moderate Democrats had a news conference, and they essentially said if Republicans wanted the best deal possible, they should have invited some of them to the bargaining table.
The Republicans are squandering an attempt to get permanent tax reform. The way you get permanent tax reform is by getting more than 60 votes. And the way you do that is working in a bipartisan way. What we show here today is that that is possible.
Top Republicans would tell you they don't expect Democrats to vote yes until Republicans can demonstrate they have 50 yes votes. If they do, then perhaps a few will come over and support tax reform, Dana.
And then what about the blow-up over the meeting that was supposed to be at the White House this afternoon?
Well, the reality is the government's due to run out of money again next Friday, December the 8th, and so there are a lot of critical issues on the agenda ahead of another Christmas recess, and so it was expected to be a critical meeting with the top 4 lawmakers from Capitol Hill, Majority Leader McConnell, Speaker Ryan, Leader Pelosi, and the Democratic leader Chuck Schumer. When the president tweeted he didn't think he could get a deal because he thought the Democrats' demands were too much, the Democrats pulled out, and the Senate Democratic leader talked about it on the floor.
There's so much to do. We're eager to get that done in a bipartisan way. Obviously, the president isn't, but hopefully Leader McConnell and Speaker Ryan are, and we look forward to sitting down with them to resolve this in an amicable way, as we did in April, when the president wasn't involved, and we got it done.
Time is precious. The government runs out of money next Friday, and so the Democrats are saying, let's cut the president out of the loop. Dana?
A week goes by pretty fast. All right, Mike Emanuel, thanks so much. Joining me now is Bret Baier, the anchor of Special Report and author of the book 3 Days in January, Dwight Eisenhower's Final Mission, which is a very good book and was very well acclaimed by many historians. So thanks for joining me, Bret. Let me start with North Korea for a second, because you were with President Trump on the trip to China, and this was a huge focus. This is the first ballistic missile test since that meeting, since President Trump decided to put North Korea back on the state sponsor of terrorism list. What do you know about this?
Well, this is a big development because, as Jennifer rightly pointed out, there's been a pause by the North Koreans in these tests, ballistic missiles, ICBMs. We, again, don't know if this is an ICBM or not, or nuclear tests for about a month. And the thought was that as China, after that meeting that President Trump had with the Chinese president, as China sent an envoy to North Korea, that perhaps there would be some success here and we wouldn't see, and there would be more of a pause. The fact that there is this ballistic missile test, and as you point out, 3 a.m. in the morning is kind of rare. The fact that it's going forward suggests that perhaps that envoy was not successful or didn't want to be successful, one of the two.
Take a listen to General Jack Keane. He was talking about this very issue just last night.
If they start testing again, it's likely that the envoy from China, who just visited recently, was trying to negotiate with them, that has not succeeded to the point where North Koreans are willing to start standing down somewhat and maybe get into some kind of negotiation phase as a result of it. But if the testing resumes and the bellicose resumes, we're kind of back where we were.
So then let me take this to that meeting at the White House that's going to be held later today. So the president had invited both Republicans and Democrats leaders to the White House. This is a meeting they have every couple months or so. But the Democrats have said they're not going to attend. But Secretary Mattis is going to be there. There are the defense budget issues, but there's also this one. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't think the Democrats are going to reconsider. I mean, it was a big standoff, and I think Senator Schumer made his stand on the Senate floor, along with that joint statement with the House Minority Leader. I do think that it is interesting that all this talk about bipartisanship by the Democrats, when they say they've been edged out, but there really hasn't been any real effort to come up with their own plans or suggestions moving forward with a Republican plan either. I think that...
Bret, I think we have the president emerging from his meeting here. We'll take a look here. But maybe he's turning around. We are not going to hear from the president, at least at this moment. So we will see if there's anything more.
Yeah, the moderate Republicans, moderate Democrats who you would think may be into this tax bill, Heidi Heitkamp, Joe Manchin, Joe Donnelly from Indiana, they've said that they're going to stick with their Democratic colleagues because there is, in their words, uncertainty on the Republican side. And there certainly is that, Dana.
We do have about 6 Republicans who have said that they've expressed some concerns. I think we got a picture of them here. But here's the thing I think about this, Brett, is that they're not saying that we are just against it philosophically, okay? They are basically saying we have very specific, narrow, targeted problems. In fact, listen to what Senator Corker said this morning.
I'm going to put the odds at overall passage. I think way too much has been placed on the committee today. The committee issue is not particularly important, candidly. It just really determines what's germane on the floor and what is not. But we do need to have this trigger issue worked out before the budget vote today.
So you've got like a specific issue on the trigger vote, a specific issue on pass-throughs, and I understand it's a little precarious, but I think suggestions from the Democrats that the Republicans aren't close, I think that's off the mark. I think the Republicans have the momentum.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I do think that there are groups, as you say. Senator Corker is in the deficit concern group, and they want to insert this trigger that says if the growth is not as great as the administration says it is, that this trigger goes in and they either have to cut or increase taxes. Then there's the group that wants the pass-through to be the same as the corporate taxes. That's the Ron Johnson and Daines group. And then there's the group like McCain and Collins who are concerned about the repeal of Obamacare. The committee he's talking about is the Senate Budget Committee, which, by the way, is scheduled to vote in 20-some minutes on this proposal.
Right.
And Ron Johnson is on that committee, and as is Corker. So if they voted no, only one vote in the committee, it would get stalled, and this thing definitely would be pushed into the new year.
And we're looking at President Trump's motorcade going back to the White House. Presumably, maybe he did not want to take questions from the media because he needs to get back to the White House to talk about North Korea and meet with his national security team there at the White House. And, of course, he's got to have tax reform on his mind. I have noticed a difference, Brett. I don't know if you would agree, but when it came to the repealing and replacing of Obamacare, President Trump sort of had a hands-off approach, let the Congress do what they want. But on tax reform, he's been to the Hill at least 3 times, I think even since I've been doing this show, only for a couple of months. And he's really sort of been the head coach on this issue. And that might make the difference for them getting this to pass.
I agree with you. And he's been obviously active on Twitter, as he often is. But we're also told he's been on the phone talking to senators and trying to get down into the weeds to figure this out. What is going to be interesting is there was originally hope that they'd pluck 1 or 2 Democrats off. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, and they just have to keep 50 plus 1 to get past the Senate.
And we know what it's like when you pass something like this on a party line vote. The other side tries to make it unpopular as possible, as Republicans did with Obamacare. But I think tax reform could be just a completely different animal.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the impetus for Republicans to get something across the finish line is pretty powerful up there on Capitol Hill. And that's why I think even Corker, who has had his reservations, puts it more on the 70-30 side.
I think they're all trying to find a way to get to yes. And I want to congratulate you on being named the awardee for the National Press Foundation's Excellence in Journalism Award this year. It is well deserved, and we're glad to have you on the show.
Thanks a lot, Dana.
All right. Thanks, Bret Baier. President Trump leaving Capitol Hill just moments ago, as we showed you, as Republicans face a tax crunch. Can the president help win enough votes to get the bill on his desk? Karl Rove will join us. Plus, new developments in the Alabama Senate contest. Could the entrance of a new candidate actually shake up that race? Fox News alert: President Trump departing Capitol Hill moments ago after talking tax cuts with Senate Republicans, while the top Senate Democrat warns the plan is going to hurt the middle class.
With any more changes, it's virtually certain you'll be voting on a bill without any expert analysis of its impacts. You'll be voting without any estimate of whether it'll grow or shrink the economy. You'll be voting without a good sense of the long-term impacts of the changes you're making to the tax code.
Karl Rove is a former senior advisor and deputy chief of staff, to President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor. I should at least know your title, Karl, since we worked together there. What do you think of Schumer's warning to Republicans? Is it going to fall on deaf ears?
Yeah, absolutely. And he's being disingenuous. There have been study after study after study on the House and Senate versions that give us a general sense of what this is going to be. And as they continue to fine-tune it, there are only going to be minor changes in what those outcomes are. The House and Senate bills are would add between $1.4 and $1.5 trillion to the deficit over the next 10 years. Out of the $42 trillion that the government anticipates receiving, we'd receive on net about $1 trillion less than that. And we have a sense of what the distribution would be. People at the bottom end are going to get, a large number of people are going to be taken off the tax rolls altogether. And most of the benefits, percentage-wise, we're going to get significant tax cuts for people who are in the low and moderate income levels. So we have a good sense of what's going to happen on the corporate side. The House and Senate bills are somewhat, mostly similar there, so we have a good idea of that. But he was being disingenuous. It's the best argument he can make right now, which is delay, 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 delay.
So the Democrats seem to think that they have the political messaging on their side. Okay, so they have their set of facts, and they're saying that it's going to be terrible. But I was interested in, did you see the letter in the Wall Street Journal yesterday signed by, I think, 8 different economists, including Larry Lindsey, who we used to work with at the White House, all saying, look, we think on net this is an absolute winner for the economy. Sure. What do you think of that strategy to get them all on board?
I think that's a good point to be made, because look, this bill in the polling is unpopular, particularly if you identify it as Trump's tax cut. If you say, do you approve or disapprove of President Trump's tax cut? About the same percentage of the people approve of the tax cut as approve of his overall job performance. But the Republicans are counting on the effect that's going to be seen in people's take-home pay. Pass this bill, and people are going to see, low and moderate income taxpayers are going to see an immediate impact in their paychecks in January, because the withholding is going to take out less money. And then the question is, will they see economic growth next year higher than anticipated that causes people to feel more prosperous, to have more jobs, feel more competitive and more secure? And the Republicans are betting on those two things. One is an absolute certainty. People are going to see less money being taken out of their paychecks. And the other one, I think, is as the article yesterday by 8 very respected economists said, we're going to add some significant economic growth to our economy, particularly in the next 5 years.
Carl, we're waiting for Senator Mitch McConnell and other Republicans to come out. They just had that meeting with President Trump. I wonder what you think about some of the moderate Democrats that came out and had a press conference around 11 o'clock, all Senate Democrats, but, sort of centrist Democrats. We're hopefully going to talk to Senator Tom Carper here in just a few minutes. What do you think about those guys saying that they're just going to be a no for right now? If the Republicans can get to 51 votes, do you think that some of them will make the decision to actually vote for tax reform, or is this just going to be a party line vote?
Look, I thought all along there's not going to be a single Democrat vote for the tax cut bill, the tax reform bill, unless their vote isn't needed. If the Republicans get to 51 or 52, they can hold that together. There's not going to be a single Democrat. A Democrat might vote for it then, but there's not going to be a single Democrat vote for this if it's 50-50 and the vice president is needed to break the tie.
Okay, so then what do you think about Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi deciding after the president's tweet this morning that they're just not going to go to the White House? We used to have those bipartisan congressional leadership meetings. They were very useful, and there's a strategy going into it. What do you think about the strategy of not going?
I thought it was childish. I mean, look, there were many a time, as you may recall, where we had the meetings with the bipartisan leadership of Congress where the Democrats had said ugly things about the president the day before or the day of the meeting. And if we suddenly said, we don't want you to attend because of that, it would have looked childish and small. And that's exactly what Schumer and Pelosi look like now. They look like they're being childish and small.
All right, Carl, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back and bring you that meeting. And we're back, and Senator Mitch McConnell's at the podium.
Will be taken. I'm going to have to run down to the White House for a meeting that I gather Senator Schumer and Leader Pelosi are not coming to, so I will not be here very long. But in order to allow for a couple of questions, I'll be happy to throw it open just for a minute, and then I'm going to call on Senator Hatch if he's here. Yeah. Nancy?
Leader McConnell, how do you address all of the concerns that some of these GOP holdouts have simultaneously without making this bill too costly?
It's a challenging exercise. Think of sitting there with a Rubik's Cube and trying to get to 50. And we do have a few members who have concerns, and we're trying to address them. And we know we will not be able to go forward until we get 50 people satisfied, and that's what we're working on.
Are you confident that if they don't fully buy in, that you can move the bill to keep the government open with only Republican votes?
Well, I never refused to go to a meeting that President Obama called, a bipartisan meeting. It never occurred to me that I could just say to President Obama, I'm not showing up. That strikes me as a lack of seriousness about the matter before us, which is the funding of the federal government of the United States for the rest of this fiscal year. So you'll have to ask them why they think it's appropriate to refuse to meet with the President of the United States over something as significant as how we're going to fund the troops and all the other needs that are addressed by the spending decisions we make every year.
Do you think that some senators are letting the perfect be the enemy of the good or the good enough on this tax bill?
Look, yeah, I'm not going to criticize individual members. Look, big, complicated bills like this are challenging. You all have watched us wrestle with this sort of thing in the past. It's always difficult, but everybody has an opportunity to weigh in. And some members are still weighing in, and we're hoping to satisfy them all. And with that, I'm going to turn over the podium to the chairman of the Finance Committee, Senator Hatch.
Oh, dear. Well, I'm happy to be with all of you. I have to say this is an opportunity for the first time in 31 years to really get a tax bill that could help turn this country even further ahead. I wish we could get rid of the partisan politics. I wish we could get both Republicans and Democrats together. This is a time when we ought to. It's an important time for our country. We've come a long way on the Finance Committee to get the bill this far, and I believe we're going to be successful. I just wish we had more bipartisan support. As you all know, I've worked all my 40 years plus years to try and bring people together on both sides. And I've never seen it worse than it has been the last few years. Hopefully we can break through with this bill. And I call on my Democrat friends, let's work together and let's get this done.
Well, I hope with regard to the perfect being the enemy of the good, I hope you'll ask Dr. Barrasso about an inspirational reading he gave us at the approval of the Constitution by Benjamin Franklin in that regard. Maybe he'll repeat it for you. To me, a yes vote on this tax bill means voting yes to a growing economy, more jobs, higher wages, and more take-home pay. A no vote, which is what our Democratic colleagues so far are telling us they're going to cast, is a vote for stagnant wages, fewer jobs, flat wages, and accepting the idea that American jobs will continue to go overseas because of our self-destructive business tax code. So this is for the doers and the dreamers and the hardworking American families who want a piece of the American dream. This is our opportunity. This is our moment to deliver to them an opportunity then to pursue their dreams, and we intend to follow through and accomplish that.
All right, that was Senator John Cornyn of Texas. We're going to actually have Senator Barrasso on this show in just a few minutes. But right now, Delaware Senator Tom Carper is a Democrat on the Finance Committee and joining me. You had a press conference earlier today, sir. What is your main complaint about the Republican tax bill as drafted?
Part of it is process, the idea that Republicans work largely on their own by themselves, rather than taking the kind of approach that Ronald Reagan, Tip O'Neill, and others took in the 1980s. Democracy is hard. Churchill said his worst form of government divides by a wit of man. And they took 3 years to hammer out a comprehensive tax reform proposal. Then they succeeded in it. But you just can't do these kind of things by yourself and hope that you'll have an enduring. The thing for me, I'm a deficit hawk. I was state treasurer of Delaware when we had the worst credit rating, governor of Delaware for 8 years. We balanced our budgets, ended up with AAA credit ratings, taxes 7 out of 8 years. So I think I know something about reducing taxes and still being fiscally responsible. The idea of adding $1.5 to $2 trillion more to our nation's debt for what I think is not a very good underlying policy, although there's stuff we agree on. That's not the way we should do it. We should do this together.
So Senator Hatch just said that he wishes that he could have more bipartisan support. He said it's been worse in the last few years. Is there anything specific that could change in the bill that's being voted on the Finance Committee today before it gets to the floor that could earn your support? Because you're not alone in having deficit concerns. There are some Republicans who have those too.
Yeah. When President Trump talked last year in the campaign and after he was inaugurated and throughout this year, he said there are basically three things he'd like to see done in tax reform. Number one, he said, I don't want this to be something to help people like me, the wealthiest people in our country. He said, I'd like to make sure that we're helping the middle class. And he said, I'd like to simplify the tax code. And as it turned out, during the time we were meeting, marking up, voting on the bill in committee a week or two ago, it's pretty clear that the folks who actually do make out really well are the folks like the president and the folks in the middle class, according to CBO and others, the folks in the middle, lower income of our spectrum, they don't do so well, and over time they do even less well. And the years like seven during our debate in our committee had stacked up on our desk like 7 big sections of the tax code about this high. And one of our expert witnesses said, we're going to have to, after we enact this bill, add an 8th big piece of big chunk.
Right, make it more complicated.
It doesn't really do what the president said.
One of the things that happened just within the last hour is the Tax Foundation has said that their analysis says that every income group is going to see some benefit, with the largest cuts accruing to moderate income families with children. If there's no Democratic votes for the bill, does this become a messaging battle between Republicans and Democrats in the next year going into the midterms?
Yeah, unfortunately, when we had the Finance Committee met and debated this bill, voted on it in committee, CBO was not invited in. They were not at the table, the Congressional Budget Office. And they have said to us, family incomes $30,000 and under actually are immediate losers starting in 2019. And by roughly 2025, even families making as much as $75,000 or $80,000 are net losers. That's, there are other people who come in and say this or that. CBO actually knows what they're talking about, and they were literally not included in the room. There's some things we agree on. I think we all agree the corporate tax rate is too high, 35 is too high, 20 may be too low, but there's a number in between that ought to work. The idea of doubling the standard deduction, I think that makes a lot of sense. The idea of increasing the child tax credit and making that a reimbursable tax credit, those are all things that we agree on, and they give us some basis to be more constructive.
Well, Senator Tom Carper, we appreciate your views. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. We have a Fox News alert. I believe Peter Doocy is with us. The Senate Budget Committee hearing is now underway. It's a crucial step toward passing the Republican tax plan in the Senate. However, GOP committee members Ron Johnson and Bob Corker have threatened that they could vote no. Peter Doocy, I think you're here. What would a no vote mean from either of them? Does that mean it's a no-go?
It would mean that it's a no-go because the Republicans only have a 1-vote advantage in this committee. So if they can't get it through the committee, then it's going to stall on its way to the floor. But this is something, Dana, and I just want to show you because we don't see this a lot. It's a budget committee hearing, not normally the most electric thing on Capitol Hill. Look at all the people that showed up. There are, I am told, about 100 protesters here getting ready for some civil disobedience. From the Center for Popular Democracy, the organizers say that they have 80 to 100 people here, and they're specifically going to try to heckle, essentially, Jeff Flake, Lisa Murkowski, and who else did they tell me? I just got this. And John McCain. So again, just short of 100 people who turned up, who normally would not be here, but they are trying to stop this tax bill because they say that it takes away their health care. So that's what the senators are going to be hearing. One of the senators who is currently a no vote, not on the committee, Republican Steve Daines, explained to me that he doesn't think this bill is fair to Main Street businesses, but he thinks he can get to a yes. Listen to this.
We've got to find some common ground in some important areas here. I think we're getting close. We've just got some more work to do.
Now, some other Republicans have other problems. Susan Collins and Jerry Moran are upset that the tax bill tries to take the teeth out of Obamacare, and then the tax bill's impact on the debt or the deficit is what is right now concerning for James Lankford, John McCain, and Bob Corker. Also, Bob Flake, who told me this is what he's hearing from his constituents. What are you hearing from your constituents?
You know, all sides, frankly. Many who realize we need tax reform. Some concerned about the deficit, obviously, and some concerned about on individual rates, what they do after 10 years and whatnot. So I'm hearing it all.
The chairman of this committee today, Senator Mike Enzi, the Republican, he says that any changes that they want to make to the tax bill should be made with an amendment on the Senate floor. He does not think there should be any changes today, and now we're just a few minutes away from finding out if that is enough to get every Republican on board. If they do it, then they can start debating this on the floor tomorrow, Wednesday. If not, then the timeline gets pushed back, and we don't know what will happen.
All right, Peter, I like how they're challenging your concentration. You did great. Thanks for being in the middle of it for us. So, with a wave of sexual harassment allegations on Capitol Hill, lawmakers are turning their attention to the Congressional Accountability Act, which outlines how accusations are handled. So, after a complaint is filed, it triggers a 30-day period that involves counseling for the accuser. After that, the accuser must go through mediation. That can also last 30 days. If mediation fails, an accuser can then file a civil suit, but only after another 30-day cooling-off period. Finally, any settlements reached at the end of the process are paid out in secret using taxpayer dollars. That's what our next guest, Congressman Luke Messer from Indiana, is hoping to change. What would your bill do, sir?
Well, it would do two simple things. First, it would stop the use of taxpayer dollars to protect members of Congress from sexual harassment claims. And then secondly, it would release the victims of sexual harassment from these non-disclosure agreements so that they were empowered to tell their story. The victim should choose. If they want to tell their story, they ought to have the opportunity to do so.
Is it retroactive for the NDAs that were signed before?
Yes, and I believe it should be. Listen, it was never okay that taxpayer dollars would be used in this way, and it's not okay to use taxpayer dollars to silence these victims. So I think it should be retroactive. And then that process you described, too, I mean, it's a mess. It seems entirely designed to protect the member with very little thought to the person who's the victim of harassment. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
What if there are accusers who want to remain anonymous? Would there be protections in your bill for that?
Yes, that's right. Our intent would be that the victim gets to choose. So if a victim wants to stay private, then they should have the opportunity to do that. But if a victim wants the opportunity to speak out and tell their story, they should be allowed to do so. We should empower the victim to make their choice.
And as I understand it, one of the reasons there's this convoluted process is that there was concern about possible false allegations that are used for political purposes. Do you try to address that in your new legislation?
Well, listen, that can be a reality, but the member has an opportunity to speak and make sure their voice is heard as well. I think when you look at where this pendulum has swung, it's swung way too far in the direction of protecting the member and away from the victim. We ought not be using taxpayer dollars to settle sexual harassment claims for members of Congress, and we ought not silence these victims with non-disclosure agreements.
All right, Congressman Luke Messer, keep us posted. We appreciate you being on.
We will. Thanks.
President Trump joining Senate Republicans for lunch with tax cuts on the menu. Senator Barrasso will tell us all about it. Coming up next. Fox News Alert Senator Schumer at the podium.
We need to write an omnibus appropriations bill. We need to extend funding for community health centers, reauthorize CHIP, pass disaster aid, and protect Dreamers. Now, in order to get all of this done in a few short weeks, all parties need to engage in good faith negotiations to reach an agreement. That's what we hoped would happen at today's White House meeting. Unfortunately, the president had other ideas. With his tweet this morning, President Trump made sure that today's meeting is nothing but a photo op. These issues are far too serious for these kinds of games. Mr. President, it's time to stop tweeting and start leading. There are serious questions that must be answered and many things that must be done. Democrats and Republicans on the Hill have come together on government funding before. In April, Speaker Ryan, Leader McConnell, Leader Pelosi, and I worked together to fund the government and avoid a shutdown. The four of us have worked together before, And we Democrats are ready to do it again. So if President Trump doesn't want to get involved in this, if President Trump says he's not interested in cutting a deal, then we suggest that Speaker Ryan, Leader McConnell, Leader Pelosi, and I sit down. We can come up with a good deal on our own. And that's what was done before. That's what can be done again. As I said, there are serious issues in front of us. We don't have time to waste. We don't have games to play. We need to fund the military. We need to protect millions of American pensions, fund scientific research and student loans. We need to rebuild in Texas, Florida, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and California, and we need to protect the dreamers. If the President reverses course and decides he wants to be a constructive force, working with both sides to forge a bipartisan deal, we're happy to meet with him anytime, anywhere, any place. But as long as he remains a destructive force, it would be a waste of everyone's time to continue working with someone who clearly has no interest in coming to an agreement. We hope the President, in order to avoid this calamity, will change his mind. The President and our Republican friends run the House and Senate. They have a responsibility not to let the government run out of funds. We're willing to work with them, but they have to do it in a bipartisan way. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Chair. All right, that was Senator Chuck Schumer. He was addressing members of the media because he's decided not to go to a meeting where he was supposed to be with the president right now. We have President Trump speaking around 3 o'clock, so you'll want to stick around for that. But right now, Wyoming Senator John Barrasso, he was at today's meeting with the president. He is the chairman of the Republican Policy Committee. Sir, thanks for being here. You had a chance to listen to Senator Schumer there. What did you make of his remarks?
Well, Dana, thanks for having me. I think it was a mistake on the part of Senator Schumer and Nancy Pelosi to not go to the White House. I know in the 8 years that President Obama was in the White House, when Republicans were invited to go to visit and meet with the president, they always did so. There is important work that needs to be done, and we need to make sure we fund the government, we fund the military, we do what we need to do with children's health care. All of those things are important. These have to be bipartisan efforts, and they have to be signed by the President of the United States. I think it's always better to meet and to talk.
So the government runs out of money next Friday. Weeks go by pretty fast. Do you think that there's going to be some sort of stopgap measure to push it forward a little bit?
Well, I believe there will be, but most importantly, the president came today to Capitol Hill to meet with the Republican members of the Policy Committee to talk about the economy, to talk about what we need to do with tax relief, to talk about the consumer confidence.